Hello everyone and welcome to another video. As you may or may not know, I studied game art for about 2 years. 2 very intensive years. And today I thought I'd share what I've learned during these 2 years. And I know the title says you don't have to study, but I'm sorry. It was just such a good title, I had to. You're not getting out of studying. To learn all of these things, there's a lot of studying involved. So the general ideas of these videos are more for people who maybe can't go to school and still want to learn these things. So I'm gonna go through all the stuff that I learned on sort of like a shallow level so that you know where you should start looking. So yeah, I'm not here to deter anyone from going to school. School is great. I love school, honestly. But if you can't go to school, the internet is a wonderland of knowledge for you to get to where you want to be. And today we're starting out with 2D. I was just gonna make one video, 2D and 3D, but as I was writing my script, I realized that there's a lot. There's a lot to be learned. So I've decided to split it up into 2 parts. So today we're doing 2D and part 2 is 3D. So where do we begin? I'd like to begin with software. When it comes to 2D, it doesn't matter as much, I feel like, as with 3D, because you got, the industry standard stuff. You still have some industry standard stuff in 2D as well that, I guess it's good. It's probably good if you at least know how to use it, but with 2D, I feel like you have a little bit more freedom when it comes to what kind of software you use. And I would say Photoshop is the standard here. It's what we learned in school, but I'm sure you could use Procreate or Clip Studio or free softwares like Krita and stuff like that. But it's probably good if you learn Photoshop. Every studio's pipeline is different, so when you get a job eventually, they'll let you know what you can use. When it comes to gear, a drawing tablet is pretty much what you need for this. Or if you're using Procreate, I guess an iPad or something like that. But that's about it, except for the computer, obviously. I do think some artists work traditionally still, but I don't see it being very common in the industry, so working digitally is probably gonna be the way to go. Again, it really depends on where you're working and what kind of project they're working on. So when it comes to where I studied game art, you needed to do a test to show off your knowledge. So they weren't gonna teach you general art knowledge, like maybe, we learned some, but it was pretty much expected that you already knew stuff. So if you don't, that's where you should start. So what I'm going to be doing here for each subject that I'm talking about is that I'm going to throw out a bunch of keywords. Either I'll explain them a little bit, or I'll just leave them for you to Google and study for yourself. When it comes to general art knowledge, there's a bunch of stuff that's really good to look into. You got anatomy, you got color theory, values, perspective, composition, and a lot more. Just make sure to practice a lot. Do a lot of still life, which is that you just draw things that you see, and you'll get there. Draw a lot of stuff that you like, that you find fun, and you won't even feel like you're studying. Okay, moving on. You've drawn a lot, you got all these skills now, but you want to be a game artist. What do you do? One of the main things we did in school, which I talked a lot about in my trace, copy, and steal video, it's literally that, copying. So when you go into the game industry, what you're gonna have to do is adapt to someone else's style, the style of the game that you're working on. It's very unlikely that you're gonna do stuff in your own style unless you're like an indie developer and you're working on your own thing. So we did a lot of studying other people's styles, trying to copy them, which was a lot of fun actually. We would get a lot of assignments which were pick a game, try to emulate that style, or who's your favorite artist on Instagram or wherever. Pick a motive of your own and try to do it in their style. And doing this is super educational and really gets you outside your box, because a lot of artists, including myself, we like to do our thing, you know? So this is a really good way to get you to try new things and learn new things that you never would have done on your own. And in so, you will have an easier way to adapt to another style when you have to. And when it comes to doing that, and also using references, which we're going to talk about, there's a great program called PureRef, which is a software that overlays any type of software you're using on your computer. So you can just pull photos in there and you have easy access references to use. And let's talk about references. A lot of people feel like they don't want to use references, or it's cheating or something like that, at least young artists that I've seen. And my teacher really wanted to put an end to all of that, so he told us to draw a bicycle, but we weren't allowed to look at references. So everyone drew a bicycle. We showed off all the bicycles, and they looked like what you would expect. That is chaos. And then he said, now draw a bicycle with a reference. And obviously everything looked a lot better. So he said, like, yeah, don't be like that. Use references, because you don't think that you know what things look like just out of your head. Most likely you don't. So that was a little fun, memorable part of my school time. Next up, style guides, mood boards, and palettes. These are some of the great things, or maybe even necessary things to have before you start on a project. A style guide pretty much, it is what it sounds like. You write out a guide for how everything should look like. So if you're a big team, everyone can follow the rules and the game will look like one person made it, I guess. But yeah, the game will look more cohesive if you have one of these. And the same goes for the mood board and the palette. I guess they pretty much go into the style guide. The palette tells you what colors you're allowed to use. The mood board tells you what mood the pieces should have. And a style guide can be very detailed sometimes, like even down to what brush size are we using? What brush are we using? Are there any overlays? Anything. And when you got all that stuff down to a T, it's time to get into it. It's time to talk about everyone's favorite, concept art. I guess a lot of artists enjoy concept art because this is where you're free to experiment and come up with ideas and have fun. And I totally get that. I enjoy it a lot myself. And for you who maybe don't know what concept art is, so if someone tells you, I want an angry looking elephant on rollerblades, then there's a lot of questions and thoughts here about, like, what should this elephant look like? What type of elephant? How big are the ears? How angry is he? What brand are the rollerblades? So concept art is pretty much exploration to get to the final design. And something I noticed in myself and also in some of my classmates is that there's sometimes you just draw a thing and then you're like, oh, this is it. Like, this is it. But our teacher would go, no, draw 10. Like, iteration is very important here. You want to do a bunch of different ones and try different things because you don't know what you don't know, So you think the first one's great, maybe the 9th one is like so much better, but you wouldn't know because you didn't draw it. So iteration is your friend here. And there's a big difference in concept sketches and concept illustrations, because you could do a full-on illustration. But the problem with that is that a full illustration takes a lot of time. So if you're still iterating on ideas on how something should look like, it's better to do a bunch of super simple sketches first before you put a lot of time down on a complicated illustration. A lot of emphasis was put on time spent because, time is money. It's very important to think about efficiency and stuff like that. A fun concepting technique we worked with in school was just doing silhouettes, because silhouettes are very important from a design point of view. Look at all of your favorite famous characters. If you just make them into silhouettes, a lot of them are very recognizable, even though you can't see anything other than their silhouette. So working that way is really fun, and yeah, it works. Let's talk about UI. UI was something we didn't do a lot of lesson-wise, but it's something that's really important when it comes to creating games. And usually you have a person that's focused on designing UI, so not everyone's gonna have to do it, but maybe you're that person, so let's talk a little bit about it. UI stands for User Interface, and it's pretty much anything that the user will be interacting with, or that the user needs to know things like, what's the health of my character? Then you need a health bar, right? So it's not canon to the actual world of the game usually, but it's very important for the player to be able to play the game. But now when I'm saying that, I do feel like a lot of games, like a lot of newer games, have integrated the UI elements into their actual game to make it so that you don't have as much clutter on your screen. If we take Dead Space, for example, our man Isaac, he's got his health bar on his back, right? So there's a lot of stuff like that happening, which is really cool. But when it comes to 2D overlaid UI, it is also really important for everything to look cohesive and that it suits the world, and you're not just slapping like a white rectangle on there going, there's this, there, put text in there, because it's not gonna look very nice. And UI is a lot of things. It's, you know, I mentioned the health bar, but it's literally everything. Menus, buttons, sliders, all kinds of different things. Also interaction things like, oh, the green button turns red when you press it or something like that. Then you need to get on that as well. And one of the most important things when it comes to designing UI is, does the player understand what's happening? Which, you just do a bunch of playtesting and see if the players understand what you've designed, and if they do, great. Moving on, I'm gonna do a little quick talk about pixel art. I'm not gonna go too far into it, because I feel like that's a whole video in itself, but a great pixel art software is Sprite. It's very easy to use. I highly recommend it. And you know, color palette and all these things are very important in all aspects, but very much so in pixel art, I feel like, because you're working with such limited pixels and you gotta make those pixels make sense. So it's a lot of focus on getting that right. And like, do you have outlines? Do you not have outlines? As I said, it's a whole art form on its own. And I love pixel art. It's a lot of fun to work with, and it's super cute and can look really cool as well. And here are some keywords you could look into if you want to get into pixel art. Jaggies, dithering, anti-aliasing, and pillow shading, and a lot more. And something that's very fun with pixel art for me as someone who really enjoys frame-by-frame animation is that it's frame-by-frame animation. Usually with 2D, you can rig that, you can do stuff like that, but with pixel art, that's a bit harder. So you actually do it frame by frame. And it's so much fun moving these little squares around and trying to make it look like, you know, the character's doing something. So let's say you've made a character, a pixel character. Or you've drawn a character in Photoshop and now you want to import that into your game engine. Now it's called a sprite. So a sprite is what we just talked about. It's a two-dimensional image, and it could be of anything. It could be a character, it could be a prop, everything you need to build your game. And there's a lot of stuff to think about when you're importing it into your game engine and stuff like that. You want to make sure they're set up in a correct way, make sure the resolution is correct. Something that's very important when you're dealing with 2D sprites or even 3D models are pivot points, which is from where does your image pivot, or from where does your model pivot. You can also rig your 2D character in the game engine. Like in Unity, you can rig your character and animate it. You can also use other software like Spine to rig and animate your character. what you do have to do for that to work is that you need to cut your character up in little pieces and then rig them so everything can bend and stuff, and it's a whole process. But it looks cool. It looks really cool. But if you've already done animation in your pixel art software, or you've already done frame by frame animation, then what you need to do is create something called a sprite sheet, which just lays out the whole animation, and then with the right setup, the game engine then can turn that into a beautiful animation. We've gone through a lot of technical stuff here. One of the last things I want to talk about is feedback. Feedback is something that's very important, especially when you're working in a group. This was almost something our teacher forced us to do, because a lot of people don't like it. It's a bit scary, you know. So while we were doing projects in school, we always had scheduled feedback sessions with like either as a group or you get a partner. Because the reality of working in games is that you just don't make a thing and then it's done. Usually, maybe you're working in a production where there's a lot of money put down into it and everything should be as good as it could be. So you want to get feedback very regularly so that you know that you're moving in the right direction with, let's say you're making a character. So you just don't want to design a whole character and then they say, don't like it, redo it. So it's better to get feedback very often so you know that, okay, they like this, they don't like that, remove that, and then they like this and that, and then now we're done and everyone's happy. So there's a lot of redoing in this industry, to say the least, and one should be able to give feedback as well as receiving feedback, because it's not something malicious, it's just something that's part of the whole process. And when it comes to having a focus in what you're doing, this is really up to you. Some people want to be character artists, some people want to be like environment artists, someone wants to just do super intricate illustrations, some people want to do sketch concepts, you know. I think if you know what you want to do, totally go for it, but if you're not entirely sure, try to maybe spread out a little bit, try different things, see what you like, because it's really good to have different things also in your portfolio later. Like you have they see that you can do environments, they see that you can do characters or props. But here's the kicker when it comes to comparing studying on your own and going to school. The best thing that my school gave me was that I could work with people. We did group projects all the time, and we went out to intern at places, so you got to work with people a lot, because that's a very important skill to have. So if you can work with other people on a project, that's great. If you don't, just keep in mind that you're gonna have to work with people. That's it. Okay, so this must be my longest video to date. Holy hell. Thank you so much for watching. The next part will be about 3D, and I will have it up in a week or so. If you enjoy what I do and want to support me, you can do so on Ko-fi, and if you want more updates from me, I upload on social media from time to time. All links are down below. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye bye.